what happens with MGM, what happens with Sands, what happens with Galaxy, what happens with the big land-based ones that then could focus, have that as a strategy to go into a continent like Africa. I think that consolidation we've only seen with Entain, Flutter, and so on. Give it 10 years, and we'll probably see the same thing with other brands going into it, but also having the media companies with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, News Corp, Comcast, all these different companies also going into local licensed markets.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo, bango, bongo, my friends. 4 years later, Rickard Vikström is back in the podcast. How are you doing today, Rickard?
I'm great. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine. I feel more healthy, more young. I feel fresher than I did last time we did this podcast 4 long years ago during COVID.
That's good to hear.
Good. And it's really interesting, Rickard. You're the CEO and the founder, of course, of Internet Vikings, and you were guest number, I think, 22 or something like that of the podcast. You were literally one of the OGs. And when we recorded that podcast 4 years ago, it was on the eve of the US election, Trump versus Biden, and here we are 4 years later. Not exactly on the eve, but just behind the doors from the next US election. And isn't it amazing, Rickard, how much can happen in one US election cycle, if you want to call it that? Because the iGaming industry, it feels like we are living in dog years or something like that. That's 4 years in the real life is like 20 years in the iGaming industry. And so much has happened since that time. But as a starting point today, Rickard, we both went to G2E last week and the time of this recording. And I just wanted to ask you, just looking at the floor plan of G2E, what can you learn from how the US online gambling and sports betting industry is developing if you compare it to previous years?
No, but and thank you for the question. And yeah, G2E was a blast last week. I'm still a little bit jet lagged, but as I don't believe in jet lag, I'm not. But if I would believe in it, I would believe it. And looking at the floor plan, we see a lot of the European platforms, European content providers coming in. We also see some of the land-based ones still doing amazing, still doing a super big stands and everything, and but on the online side we see a lot of growth from the US, people that heritage from the US, but also from Europe, and we see some shifts in platforms. Last year there were a few platform providers that didn't exhibit this year. Mercure had a big stand, even though I don't think they do anything online in the US. But on the land-based side, they had a lot to show. And then there were everything from lawyers to security systems to all these really, really cool money counting machines that as big as the room I'm in right now, that it can count millions and millions each and every day. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I would say, if we just look at the online part of G2E, the dedicated zone there,
Yeah.
I would say that the thing that stood out to me a lot this year was the focus on sweepstakes and just in general the discussions around the industry. I attended the SPGA event that they organized there, which is a sweepstakes association, and the whole event was overbooked. They had overbooked it like a week before the event happened. So many people had interest, and actually a lot of our old friends, from back in the day in the industry, we've known each other for a long time, Rickard, and a lot of the old founders from like some of the Scandinavian brands have kind of made a return into the US now because of the sweepstakes model and so on. And that seems to be where the action is right now. And I don't know what you feel about that trend at the moment. Did you take note of that as well?
Of course. And like different companies take different decisions in the sweepstakes industry. We, at the Internet Vikings, we took a decision that we don't work with it a few years back, just to because we have over 10 licenses on me personally, and I don't want to jeopardize the Internet Vikings business because of it. And that's why I think we see that there's either you have a US license in, say, Michigan, New Jersey on that iGaming side, or you do sweepstakes. It's either I haven't seen anyone that do both of them. Maybe it will happen in the future, but I haven't seen anyone dare to do both, because you never know what the regulators and how they will address it. Maybe not tomorrow, but 2-3 years down the line, when there's a lot of essentially tax revenue that's getting lost to the sweepstake operators.
Yeah, fair enough. And, if we go back to our podcast that we hosted together 4 years ago, we talked a lot about predictions, right? The podcast at that time, just like it is today, it's centered around the future. And we're going to return to sweepstakes later on today. But I want to just kind of revisit that podcast a little bit and talk about some of the predictions that we made at that time. Because, again, 4 years ago, it seems like a fairly short time ago, but, 4 years ago, the US online landscape was in its very infancy, right? It wasn't clear exactly how the US market was going to develop, other than it was the big opportunity of the time. And I remember, one thing that we talked about is the future opportunity that Internet Vikings had, for example, in the US market. And you talked about this being the growth opportunity and the market that you wanted to enter. And as far as I understand it, 4 years later, this is now a majority of the revenue that you make is from the US market. But can you talk a little bit more about perhaps some of the predictions that we made in the last podcast, and how did they play out?
Yeah, no, and we can start with on the Internet Vikings side. As you mentioned, that like you asked me a question like, what does Internet Vikings do with the US? And where we were doing our business plan for the US at a time, and that where we started. And you said that a online gaming year is a lot quicker than like a normal calendar year, and that's how it felt for us. Like what we managed to accomplish this last 4 years has been like tremendous. Just looking back at it just 4 years ago. So for us, it's been amazing. But looking at the predictions we did, I think one prediction was that either LeoVegas, Kindred, or Betsson was going to get bought by a big US land-based operator. And that happened. We all know that LeoVegas got bought by BetMGM, and we'll see what happens with that. That's when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is an interesting move of MGM, especially with the collaboration with Entain on the BetMGM side.
Yeah. What do you think is the logic behind that deal? Is it diversification? I mean, it seems like a company like MGM is entangling itself in a quite complicated relationship with BetMGM, which is the subsidiary that is 50% owned by MGM and 50% owned by Entain. And at the same time, MGM is now acquiring LeoVegas to potentially grow outside of the US. Then there seems to be a little bit of a difficult situation there with these two operators in the same portfolio?
I would guess so. I don't have any insight on it, but of course, if you have, I think they're competing head to head in Canada, if I'm not mistaken, and we will see what happens. And it's not the short term. Like, MGM doesn't buy LeoVegas on a short term play. It's a 5 to 10 year focus, and it's a 5 to 10 year plan they have, and we will see now when we do this next podcast in probably 4 years what actually happened with it, because it could be that they start compete head to head. You see the subsidiaries competing with each other. Like we have seen a lot of the brands in Europe that have a multi-brand strategy, and it's not something new in the industry. We just in a small country as Sweden, there is operators that have maybe 2, 3, 4 brands. And it have worked perfectly. And so that multi-brand strategy might not be a bad thing in the end of the day.
Yeah. It seems almost like a contingency plan to some extent. Because imagine, the situation that this is today. Imagine you work at BetMGM, and usually you would have, if you have an owner or a boss to report to, that manager will give you clear instructions on what the goals and the targets are for the business. But here you have two separate businesses that are completely different from each other that own this entity 50-50. So on the one hand, you need to report to MGM that might have certain business interests for BetMGM. And then on the other hand, you have Entain with its own problems and issues that they are going through from a European perspective. Let's say one entity can play the long game and the other entity needs to see profitability right away, right? And so it seems to be a difficult relationship to manage when two so dynamic businesses are growing at different rates and so on and so forth, that you would imagine that the play with MGM acquiring LeoVegas would be potentially to fall back more on the LeoVegas brand in the future. I just don't see, like, if we go forward 4 years time, if we were to make predictions today, I think one of my predictions would be that the relationship between BetMGM and Entain and MGM is probably not going to look the same in 4 years' time. Whether that being, Entain buying out the BetMGM brand or MGM taking that brand or something in the middle. I think that would be my first prediction today, that does not seem to be a sustainable relationship in such a hyper-competitive market like the US, where you really need to go towards a unified strategy.
Yeah. No, but like I said, it's going to be interesting. I don't want to make any predictions on just that case. But for sure, to have those kind of joint ventures, there is, but look back at it. The last, is it 5-6 years? They've done an amazing job. Like they've gone from having that partnership, having that piece of paper basically, to today a company with, I think it's 2,500 employees. I think they did a good job, like the BetMGM company, to handle that joint venture, handle it all together. But like I said, going forward, we will see what happens. But I still do believe they have managed to build something great, and also try to build in the BetMGM sportsbook into the retail side on the land-based side, and try to build that omni-channel better than I think anyone else. I haven't seen anyone else now coming from Vegas that are been able to build everyone talk about omni-channel and build that, actually get it to work. And I think BetMGM, Entain, and MGM have actually, I don't know anyone that have done it a better job than them on that, put it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to give it to the MGM team. They are second to none. Everyone from Adam Greenblatt and Vitek and all those guys, they have done an incredible job, building the brand as it is today. And as you point out, they are the leaders on the omni-channel approach and the brand building that they've executed with the massive Super Bowl ads and brand partnerships and so on and so forth. They definitely take the lead on that side. And they were the first one also to become more efficient, rather than a focus on GGR necessarily. They were the first ones to start focusing on more on the NGR side. Like, GGR is not always the most relevant metric to understand if a business is doing well, especially not in the US. But BetMGM were early on to kind of switch from that GGR obsession into a more sustainable, let's say, approach to the business. And that's reflected in their numbers, of course. They're doing well now and so on. So it's an interesting business to keep an eye on for sure.
Yep.
Another point that we talked about in the last podcast, as you pointed out here as well, is in general, this trend at that time we predicted, which was a pretty out there prediction if you take historically, that US land-based casinos would enter online gambling. And historically, we talked about Sheldon Adelson, the late owner of the Sands, who's a legend in Vegas, who were a fierce opponent to online gambling for many, many years. But in retrospect, it feels a little bit like COVID was kind of like the trigger that pulled the land-based casinos into online. And I suppose my question to you, Rickard, is if it wasn't for COVID, do you think that the land-based casinos in the US would have embraced the industry? Or do you think that it would be a completely different market today?
I think it would be a completely different market, of course. And we talked about it then. It's like we talked about when it was like full COVID lockdowns in many parts of the world. And I don't think that we would have seen as many market access deals that have happened the last 4 years if it wouldn't been because of it. Because we talked about it, okay, you need, as a brick and mortar casino owner, you need a fallback. You need something else because you had nothing. There was no one in the casinos. And that's what online gave them, to have that kind of contingency plan. And maybe a contingency plan now is it's primary business. It's maybe a big part of the revenue for these for the land-based, and also not only on the bigger market access states, but also where the smaller ones, where maybe only is a few ways to get market access to that state. I think that we wouldn't have seen those deals been able to get signed if it wouldn't be because of COVID.
Yeah, and it's interesting observation, because it took all the way until 2020 before we saw the major land-based casinos enter online, right? It wasn't the land-based casinos that were driving innovation and took ownership of the space in online in the early 2000s. It was the internet natives at that point who took charge and who started the first online casinos that then became the Betsons, the Kinderds, and so on of the industry. And only 20 years later, did these really cash-rich and strong and kind of well-positioned casino operations take advantage of the industry. And it just goes to show, that innovation happens often from places where you don't expect them to happen. Because if you were, let's say, an analyst in the 1990s and you would make a prediction who is going to be the biggest online casino in the 2000s, the natural guess would be one of the land-based casinos. And just like today, we are thinking about the industry of, who is trying to take lead in the esports betting or in the crypto gambling world and so on and so forth. And the innovation in general isn't coming from founders that are from the iGaming industry then, but it's coming from individuals who are from those other verticals. And that just goes to show, that we shouldn't always take for granted that innovation comes from where you most expected, let's say.
But it's quite easy because you have an outside view. You maybe have can build a product that's better fitted for the customers if you're coming from the outside, because you come into something with a completely new view on how you should do things, and maybe that's better for the user, which then makes a better product. And like always when you build a company, it's all about execution. The product is good to have a good product, but then it's also all about execution and do a great execution. And if we look at the different companies that's grown in the gaming space the last 4 years worldwide, it's because they have been so good at executing well, getting the marketing, and if they put $1 into the marketing, they get 1.2, 1.3, 1.5 back. And that's how you get a growing business and be able to sustain that and execute on that funnel and execute on that strategy for a very, very long time.
Yeah, and that also almost implies that the iGaming industry isn't really focusing that much on disruptive technologies, but it's focusing much more on iteration, right? Like these small tweaks that are, like if you tweak and you optimize your company, you will get that extra 10%, which will carry across profitability. Is that a feeling you get as well, that the industry is not that focused on innovation, but more focused on optimization and so on?
I would say you have two sides. On the marketing side, we've seen, like the last 4 or 5 years, with operators coming up coming from nowhere just because they're good at the marketing. You have Stake being a very good example, going in and from getting a Formula One team basically to everything else they've done on YouTube, they've done on Twitch, they've done on all other social media platforms. They managed to excel that and execute on it very well. And that's where it comes into, on the marketing side, you need to innovate, you need to do things. But on the product side, like, yes, you have gamification, but looking at the casino only today and looking at casino only 10 years ago, like some would argue that it's a big difference, but like it's a lobby. You go in, you play, you have your wallet, you win, you don't, you log out.
And in the back end, you can argue there's a lot more suppliers that make things more efficient. But at the end of the day, we all fall back on the leg of the chair that carries us that is called Excel. Right? Excel is the software that keeps the whole industry functioning.
Exactly.
Yeah. I spoke to one of the biggest B2B gambling companies in the world. And they do a lot of account management, and it's an old company and whatnot. So they don't have a CRM, for example. They do everything in Excel. So like all the account managers get reports in Excel each day. They update numbers in Excel, and there's not even a CRM that is implemented. That's still, the legacy that the industry is carrying with them. I think it comes a lot from the hyper growth in some companies. They haven't really had the urge or the kind of the panic or the will to kind of update systems. It's been, they've been growing every year, focuses on growth, things are working, and so they kind of become relaxed to some extent. And it's still slow moving industries to some extent, even though we are a tech industry.
Yeah, no, and that's creates opportunities, right? That Excel sheet, it's not like the most streamlined operation. That makes opportunity for someone else to come in to streamline that with a CRM, doing the same thing, but if you do that thing a little bit better, you have better profit, then you can invest more money in marketing, and then you get a positive, do things a little bit better, which we have seen with a lot of operators coming in, do things a little bit better,
yeah,
and just grow hundreds and hundreds of % year over year.
Yeah, and if you were to compare the industry between 2020 and 2024, if you look at the industry at that time and the industry today, what would be the biggest changes in your opinion? What are the things that stand out to you if you compare the two?
No, but if we talk about the US, it's just the market has grown so much. There's so many more states that have opened up, and it's bigger ones. You have Pennsylvania, Michigan, that's grown a lot. You have Massachusetts, Arizona. There's so many of them that have gone online, if I call it like that. New York, don't forget New York, that have, like, it's $1 billion business today. And that I would say is the biggest change that have happened over the last 4 years. To address a lot of people in the US but still, you only address a very small number of the GDP of the US, because you have Florida, you have Texas, you have California, and a few other bigger states where you don't have a regulated, local license regulated environment where Sweepstakes and others can go in and do offshore gaming, or try to lean on the federal sweepstake legislation.
Yeah, I would also say, comparing the two, in 2020, the regulated landscape in the US and in Europe, a lot of operators and the industry were leaning into regulation. Whereas today, I think that the eyes and the focus and the investment and the innovation is happening from these alternative products or alternative routes into the industry, if you want to call it that. In the US, it's not only sweepstakes, but like sweepstakes, DFS, social. Obviously, crypto gambling is a huge part in the global world as well. Many of the operators on the European side are entering the market to gray markets and so on. And it feels like 2016 to 2020, the industry was leaning into regulation, and it was a lot about kind of becoming more legitimate as an industry, if you want to call it like that. Whereas now, in the last 4 years, we are moving a little bit the other direction. Do you see that as well, and why do you think that is, if so?
But I think we talked about that 4 years ago, that if you're a CEO of a gaming company, you can't say that you don't like legislation and local regulation, because you need to say it. But on the other side, it opens up for the gray market and the issues with canalization, the not local licensed operators. It's a big issue, because you have like two different, you're playing with two different set of rules. You have the local operators trying to obey the local legislation in the UK, in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in Germany. But then you have the crypto casinos, the offshore, the Curacao licensed ones that just do whatever they want and give out bonuses and do whatever. And I think it's an issue for the industry. If we look at some of the shows, the trade shows that have been the last, not in the US, but in Europe, the only exhibitors on the operator side, it's crypto casinos, is not licensed ones. Those are the ones that are able to get stands, get traction, like pay for that. The local ones, local regulated ones, they don't. Maybe don't want to associate themselves with the crypto ones that are exhibiting, or they don't have the money for it, because the budget is so tight. The marketing budget is so tight because they need to pay the taxes. They can't do bonuses. They can't do this. They can't do that. And they try to compete with the crypto casinos, which, again, look at 10 years ago at ICE. Then you had the big operators, the well-known bigger operators that was local licensed, that had the booths and stands. And today I saw someone in Amsterdam, a conference in Amsterdam, they didn't even show the brands of the operator. It just said affiliate program, own brands. It's like, that was the only thing. It's like, okay, but what are you actually trying to do here? It's like, and there was a big bar and there was music. It was like, they didn't even say what kind of operator they were trying to market themselves.
Yeah, and even if we take 10 years ago and you take the brands that we see as highly regulated today, again, Kindred, Betsson, LeoVegas, these companies were still born out of the gray markets. When I worked for Betsson Group in 2011, there wasn't any regulation in Sweden, Norway, Denmark came, 2013 or whatever it was, 2012 or something. So that is still the industry that we grew up in, let's say, and still those brands were kind of seen as legitimate and good standing and so on and so forth. But it feels almost like the industry has made it feels like we've gone full circle to some extent, that the industry is back at its roots. You have these two parts of the industry. One is highly regulated, and some companies are leaning into that, mostly publicly traded companies, whereas the new generation and pretty much all the startups that are entering the industry today, whether it is in US or Europe, are doing so via alternative routes into the industry rather than regulation. It seems to be unsustainable. I mean, what's going to happen in 4 years from now?
Yeah. No, but before, if I look at that, they were leaning on the free trading EU. They were trading on the Malta license, Gibraltar, that kind of license system. Now there is licenses from countries that's maybe not even a country, that it's just think they are a country. Or there's so many different places in the world that try to say they have a license structure just to sell some licenses, and there's no background checks, KYC, anything that actually do anything good for the industry.
Yeah. Another interesting note as well is you have some companies that are coming seemingly from nowhere and buying up assets that are known within our European and American side. A good example of that is like we talked about yesterday, is Sega Sammy. Sega, we are kids from the kind of 80s, 70s, so on. We are used to Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega, and these days Sega is most of the revenue that they acquire is from Pachinko, which is like this local kind of sweepstakes like a gambling model in Japan, which also is operating on a little bit of a loophole type way into gambling, and they are acquiring up some really like solid companies in Coolbet, for example, and which one the Stake Logic, Stake Logic they acquired as well. Is that something you expect as well? What do you think of that, Rickard? And do you think more companies will?
No, but I think it's super cool that you have that kind of movement, and we have this that they're buying into the market because they see it. Like you said, the Summit side of Sega Summit that's coming from they're coming from the gaming side, but then you have Sega that's, like you said, it's the more traditional non-gambling side of gaming. And I think it means that it's getting more diverse, getting more channels out to attract new players, because that's what it is in the end of the day. It's just channels to get other players coming into the market. And we see the same thing with ESPN and ESPN Bet that coming into the market. And it's like, who owns ESPN? It's Disney. And like, what happens next? Would it be Donald Duck Casino? Like, and maybe 4 years, when we sit there in 4 years, there will be a Donald Duck Casino. We don't know, but that's the kind of where it's heading. Like, these kind of bigger media companies see gaming as an additional revenue stream. You have the same thing. You have Fanatics, great company. They've done taking a market selling T-shirts, if I make it simple. They're going into the gaming industry as well. Then you have the, like I said, the ESPN. What happens if, let's say, Microsoft starts Minecraft, or Activision, you have Blizzard, these kind of huge entertainment companies, if we call them that, coming into the gambling side of the industry. And I don't think it's a question if, it's a question of when they do it.
And if you would say that in 2019, it would be unthinkable, right? Like, I go back to the original iGaming Next that we hosted in 2019, and Todd Household, the CPO of Evolution, went on stage to play a mind game. And it's like, what if Amazon starts Amazon Casino, right? Like, what do we do as an industry if the biggest, one of the biggest companies in the world just decides to flip the button and we launch Amazon Casino now, and anyone who has ever searched for a gambling book will be instantly targeted by their offers. And Todd was like, do you think they are gonna acquire the games from other game studios? No, they're gonna start their own game studio. They're gonna start Amazon Casino game studio and do their own thing. And it was, people were laughing in the audience at that time. But look now, 5 years later, and you have brands like ESPN, Disney, obviously, that have entered the industry and the land-based sector in the US. Many household brands, many media companies that are promoting the industry, and so on. And so you would imagine that in the next 4 years, we'll see more of these kind of household tier one kind of media and potentially gaming brands as well that decide, as you mentioned, like Blizzard, for example. Okay, Blizzard has an incentive to grow. And just like, Konami came from the gaming world, Sega came from the gaming world, and they want to find growth opportunities. So why wouldn't Blizzard decide that they are now going to become a game studio and design the best games that's ever been produced for the gambling industry and take a big part of that market, for example?
Yeah, no, but exactly. And it doesn't need to be that it's like Blizzard Casino. It could be that it's a small part, let's say, of Angry Birds. It could be a small bonus run. It could be a small extra feature in Angry Birds or a game, Minecraft, any game like that, where Roblox and so on, where you have a connection to the industry and where you can get players in to play something. It doesn't need to be interesting. It doesn't need to be like the normal slots. It could be something else, but it's still a casino, right? And then have that, and then that will evolve into more and more gambling within the gaming industry.
Yeah. And this is also part of the trends that are shaping the industry right now, which is kind of like the lines are becoming more blurred, what is gambling and what is not gambling. And the iGaming industry has always been very black and white. The operators, they look the same, they offer the same games, sports betting, casino, poker, bingo. But nowadays you have DFS, there is social, there is sweepstakes and pachinko and so on. And all of these products are blurring the lines, and even in the gaming industry, then as in computer gaming, loot boxes, for example, is blurring the lines of what is gambling and what is not gambling. And maybe that is more where the these kind of brands from the outside will kind of continue to blur the lines for us. If Counter-Strike can do loot boxes, maybe Angry Birds can come up with something similar to what the loot box is, to continue that kind of blurring the lines. And obviously the gamings are already doing social gaming, right? And you can already play slot machines for play money, but you have to pay to go to the next level and so on. And
No, but like you said, you take sweepstakes. What do you take sweepstakes into? Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, like these Minecraft. What happens if you merge that together? What kind of revenue stream could Microsoft gain out of that? Probably billions if you get all the players within the Microsoft gaming ecosystem just play sweepstakes to attract a lot, 40-something states that allow sweepstakes.
Yeah.
That's
exactly
where you can, and we're not talking millions, we're talking billions and probably hundreds of millions in just pure profit.
Yeah, exactly. And even, from within our industry as well, I think from the conversations I'm having now, especially sweepstakes sits a little bit in the middle between gambling industry and the social casino. And then there's like sweepstakes in the middle there that adds the element that you can actually cash out the coins and stuff like that. But because of sweepstakes, the industry is also waking up to the fact that the social casino vertical is like a multi-billion-dollar industry as well. And there are a couple of companies that are producing these gambling-like games, which doesn't have an element of you can actually win something, but you can pay to continue to play, basically. And why wouldn't the playing goals and the evolutions of this world try to figure out how to migrate their game portfolio into a social casino world, for example? So maybe there is also disruption happening from our industry into other similar such industries as well.
Yeah. No, but because in the end of the day, it's just one thing. It's creating a product that users want to have. And that's just what it is. Just create that product that attracts players, users, consumers in the best way possible.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Rickard, we started the podcast today by mentioning that we recorded this on the eve of the election last time, and we didn't know who was going to be the winner at that time. We speculated and so on, and now we are a little bit before the election in 2024, and just looking at trends in how to predict elections, it's some interesting disruption coming from our industry, something we can be proud of, because if you look at election forecasting in 2020, it was all about the 538 polls and the weighted polling, and that was going to give us some indication on who was in the lead and so on and so forth. Turned out in both 2016 and 2020 that the polls were quite off, and it's not to be trusted to some extent. And now what is happening in 2024 instead of people falling back on polling, people are falling back on where do people put their money, right? That is not a biased decision, right? So Polymarkets, I don't know if you had any chance to check out Polymarkets, Rickard, but that is the site that is being quoted as kind of like the best indication you can get for where the election is heading. And all it is a betting market, right? But, we can think of many betting markets that have already used this model for a long time, but Polymarkets is the first one that took it and kind of made it into a election indicator first and a betting site second. And, CNN, Fox, everyone is quoting Polymarkets these days. Have you had time to see this?
I haven't looked at it, but it makes sense because you get statistics work like a poll. Basically, you just take 1,000 or 4,000 people asking what they're going to vote for, and the Polymarkets takes probably tens or hundreds or millions of people for the same thing, and that, in the end of the day, should be statistically wise as good as any other way to do statistics.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, if we look at the difference now in this time of recording, for example, the polls are still saying that Kamala Harris and Trump are neck and neck. Let's say the polls are pretty much neck and neck at this point. However, if you look at Polymarket, where do people put their money? 62% is on Trump, right, and 38% is on Harris. And so what it means is that people with money are believing that Trump has a higher chance of winning. And this sets the pace for the odds then, basically. So if you want to place money on Harris, if you place $100 on Harris, you will get $138 if you win at this point, basically. So it doesn't matter if you support Trump or Harris. You are going to put your money where you think you will find the most solid odds. So, like, if I support Trump, but the odds on Harris are really solid, then I will bet money on her.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's a quite interesting way of just looking at innovation that is coming from our industry that is entering the mainstream, and Polymarket now huge, obviously. So and good for SEO, right? They are being quoted by everything from CNN to Fox and so on. So if you Google election forecasting, Polymarkets will be one of the top ones. Yeah. Brilliant. What a business. So, Rickard, looking forward now into the next 4 years, perhaps, if we want to make a little bit of predictions, just as a general open question, what would you say are your kind of top predictions now going into the next 4 years, as I mentioned before, and just in the context of this discussion? Let's start, for example, on the world of crypto and regulation, let's say. Where do you think the industry will move in the next 4 years?
I think that it will be, like you said, 2, maybe 3 different buckets. One like full crypto black market, then one that's trying to be something in between, and then you have the big ones that are doing full only regulated, local regulated operators. And I think it's all about what you want to do, right? Like if you have a crypto casino only getting cash, you get valued on the free cash flow. It's kind of hard to sell a company like that because you don't know one to sell it to, because the company could be gone tomorrow because it's basically just a black market crypto casino. And yes, you do generate a lot of cash flow, but you can't get an edge in terms of valuation on the stock market, on the private market, or anywhere. While you have on the local licensed ones, where like if you look at Entain, that have had the last 10 years of focus to get like increase the local licensed part of the business and get pushing away the non-local licensed one. Same thing. A lot of the slot providers that I talk to is like, yes, there's some saying we have had a lot of revenue from the gray markets, but today one of our most important KPIs is going from the gray market to local licensed markets, because in the end of the day, that creates shareholder value. And I think that's something that in this whole equation, it's all about creating shareholder value. And you do that by having a sustainable product. And having a sustainable product, you need to know that you will be able to generate revenue and free cash flow, not tomorrow, but maybe 5 years down the line. And the only way to do that is to have a good local licensed model. So that, I hope, the kind of valuation, that I hope that will then drive the local licensed operators and slot providers for them to grow and become bigger than the black ones that just focus on the cash flow as of today, tomorrow.
Yeah, more jurisdictions are obviously regulating any given month globally as well. So the kind of gray territory markets are shrinking and shrinking. So it's becoming more clear that it's not a lot of gray territories like there were
there is black and white
years ago, but it's more black and white these days. Yeah. That's right.
That's what we're seeing. And
yeah,
but again, for me, I would bet my money on where you know that you will have a longer sustainable business, aka not the black ones, because the company could be gone tomorrow. If I want to invest in a company, I would never do it in a black market operator, because the company, your money could be gone literally tomorrow because of something, while the local licensed ones should be more sustainable.
Yeah. And another, on that note as well, Rickard, more territories are regulating locally. And I think we talked about this in the last podcast, that the industry is becoming more localized in general. We talked last time about, Malta or Gibraltar headquarter business with, in my case, when I worked at Betsson, we were 20 people in our team and 19 of us were Swedish. And the 20th person was Spanish, I remember. We still spoke English in the team. But we were not localized at all, right? We were targeting everywhere at the same time. Whereas now, something that was unthinkable a couple of years ago was like, thriving offices in Brazil, in Colombia, in South Africa, and all over the world. And so you have a lot of like hero brands that have been born in local jurisdictions across the world. But I'm curious to know, as we go into the future, do you think these massive conglomerates like Flutter and Entain, will they start to consolidate the market more and more, do you think? Or will it be the hero brands that will become the winners, let's say, even in the local jurisdictions?
I think we'll see both. It's that easy. If you have someone growing and have a big part of the market, like just look at what Entain have done the last 5 years. They bought NLabs that focus on the Baltics. You had STS in Poland. They who bought Superbet. Like there's a lot of these different local hero brands that have been bought by these bigger conglomerates. And going back to what we talked about before, what happens with MGM, what happens with Sands, what happens with Galaxy, what happens with the big land-based ones that then could focus, like have that as a strategy to go into a continent like Africa, because Africa is, like, we're talking 2.5 billion people. It's growing in terms of a market. The GDP is growing, and I think that consolidation we've only seen with like Entain, Flutter, and so on. Give it 10 years, and we'll probably see the same thing with other brands going into it, but also having the media companies with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, News Corp, Comcast, like all these different companies also going into local licensed markets. Maybe not in Europe, maybe not in the US, but Africa, Asia, Latin.
Considering the growth now of the industry as well in the last 4 years, Rickard, I mean, we can see it quite clearly at the trade shows, the growth, like how big is the industry, you know, just look at how many events were happening in 2019 and how many events are happening today and how populated they are, and you can get a feeling of the fact that the industry has just completely exploded. It feels still that we are still in the infancy of this growth, you know, because the growth is coming from off the back of the fact that, the industry is more localized. You know, if you want to operate in Brazil, you need to work with partners that are experts in that market, not just some random company that is serving all the geos, let's say. And it still feels like we have Africa in front of us, you know, Asia potentially, other growth markets. US is still only regulated in 7 states when it comes to online gambling, for example. And it still feels like there's so much more growth to be had in the industry, at least from my perspective. So my question is like, do you feel that in 4 years' time? Will
no, but 100%. No, but it is. And that's why I like to be in the gaming industry. Because we are getting started. Like, we can do what we do today for the next 30 years. In different forms, in different ways, in different anything. But I do believe that within the next 20 to 30 years, we will see a lot of growth in different areas. Because it's still a very, very young and fragmented market. Like, we are working with one of the big sportsbook platforms in Africa. And I was like, I asked them, why is it doing so well for you? It's like, we have 200 we have so many payment providers integrated. We have so many different ways of doing business in different ways in different parts of Africa. And that's why we're good. And then because it's so local, the gambling business, it's so what they do, if it's betting shops, if it is only online, if it's payments, if you can use PayPal in Germany, if you cannot use PayPal in Germany, if you can do this, if you can that, it's still so evolving, and it can shift. And if you find that right product, right niche, you can scale it so quickly in just 24 months. And you have that in like 150 countries around the world. It's so that's why I like it. I think I can't find any other industry in the world that will be able to grow in this pace we do worldwide. I can't name any other industry.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
We're innovative. No, definitely not. But Rickard, iGaming is all I know, my friend. I've been working in this industry since I was 17. I have no other knowledge outside of this industry, I must say. So I'm not the best person to survey on that front. I can tell you. But I mean, I agree as well. It is such an incredibly innovative industry. At the end of the day, you know, we deal with money transactions, right? Players betting and wanting to do so frictionless, easy, straightforward, trustable, and so there are so many opportunities to be a part of that ecosystem to make that journey easier for the player, right? And that's at the end of the day what matters.
No, but then that's what we see. Like if you look at Vikings, that's what we see as well, and also the capacity needed to do this, like. And also what we've seen in the US, you asked me before, like what do we see in the US? And I think on the technical side, we see that it's mature and it becomes better, because I've talked to so many companies are like, yeah, we're running $100 million business out of this one rack in a basement, or this one rack somewhere, and these 4 servers somewhere. And I'm just like, but we need to diversify. You cannot make a couple of $100 million from this big compartment. You need to have like 2 physical buildings, because if one, like we all have seen the disasters in North Carolina and Florida last week and the week before. That's the kind of what we need to prepare and have that kind of disaster recovery. And now people are actually starting to see that shift, starting to execute on actually fixing that. But 3 years ago, it was like, no, everything is good. We will run $100 million business from a small compartment, which maybe is not sustainable.
True. So again, last time we made some like hard predictions here, and I put the stake in the ground and mentioned that I think LeoVegas, Kindred, or Betsson Group will be acquired by a US land-based casino. And it's interesting, just to go back to that prediction, because those 3 companies with very similar origin, Swedish founded, focused on the Scandinavian market, started to diversify. They took 3 completely different paths in these 4 years. Betsson is still operating as a publicly traded company. They still do their own thing. They were able to be successful in the Latin American market since that time, choose not to go into US. Kindred eventually got bought up by FTJ, a French gambling company. And of course, LeoVegas were then acquired by MGM, and we were able to take credit for that prediction finally.
And I think we also talked about Caesars and William Hill.
Yes.
That Caesars were not I think we said they're not so interested in the William Hill European business, and as we saw a few months later, they sold it. And that's kind of fun when you are in this industry. A little bit okay, what kind of focus people are doing. It's like, okay, this they will probably sell it. They will probably do that. This one will probably do that. It's like, and that's what I again like being at all these trade shows around the world, because I just go around and listen. I just ask a lot of questions. A lot of my colleagues is like, why did you ask that question? Like, because I wanted to know. I was super interested in what they're actually doing, because I want to have that knowledge, because I think that's a hobby for me, to have and know what's going on and understand what's going to happen with the industry.
Yeah, we are curious people, Rickard. And so that begs the question then, what companies in the next 4 years will be acquired? And if you really think deeply here now, if you can think from your hat, or maybe take some of the things that you heard around G2E or other conferences or speculations and whatnot, what companies will be acquired in the next 4 years? So we have something to follow up on.
No, but I think some of the bigger slot providers, both from the land business, what would Novomatic do? What would Mercury do? What would these huge companies we've seen all the push that Aristocrat have done with the Neo Games, Aspire, Roxor acquisition. What will Light & Wonder do? Will they start acquiring online brands to put on their platform? We also what will happen within the and I believe we're seeing consolidation on a lot of the slot providers, because there's a lot. Evolution started a little bit 3-4 years ago with No Limit. They did NetEnt, obviously, and it was called BG something. Yeah. But then they stopped. Okay, what will happen with that? And we see, will they need to continue to grow? We see that Playtech Live is growing a lot. And doing a lot of cool things in the US. What does that mean to Evolution for the US market? We all know that the Evolution quarterly Q3 report comes in 2 weeks, and
that's going to be an interesting
that would be the first thing I read when I wake up this morning, because it will be probably the first interesting one.
Yeah, the protests in Georgia. Yeah, that's the big one.
Like it will be interesting to see how they manage to, because they've had a lot of, as you have when you run a company, like it's ups and downs. Like there's always something happening that you need to handle as a company, and that's going to be interesting to see how they handle it and what's the financial outcome of it.
Yeah.
So I think on the provider side, we will see a consolidation, like we talked about in the beginning with Sega Sammy buying GAN and Stake Logic, and the rumor is they have a few $100 million more to spend on other things. So I think we'll see that. We saw again Push getting bought by LeoVegas, and I think we'll continue seeing that kind of roll up on the slot B2B side.
Yeah, so let's see a hard prediction here. So 2020, 2024, proliferation of game studios, right? There's hundreds of game studios. Yeah. Would you say in 4 years' time that we're going to go back to a fewer amount of game studios?
That's a good one. That's
I'm not letting you off easy.
No, because it's so easy to set up one. It's so easy to build it in the studio. I think the question should be, will we see a lot of big ones like we see today with, let's say, Play and Go and Pragmatic and so on? No, I don't think we'll see these kind of game studio manage to build to massive companies like Pragmatic, like Play and Go, Evolution, of course, because the market is so much more diverse today than it was. When did Pragmatic start? 2016? 14, 16, something like that. And like Play and Go started a lot earlier, but it was when HTML5 and mobile came when they started to grow a lot. And I think, my belief is that on the bigger game studios, we won't see that many. But on the indie side, we will see a lot of them.
Yeah. And one word, we talk about future here, in 1 hour, a word that we haven't mentioned is AI, right? I mean, which is a pretty remarkable feat for a forward-looking podcast. We should be proud of that. But nonetheless, on the game studio side, already today you can produce pretty remarkable games using AI in a 360-degree view, both when it comes to the audio and the visuals and the animations. And considering the exponential growth on that side, you would just imagine that, I mean, in 4 years' time, it must be the press of a button to create slots, right? And that will just completely flood the market. Because even if you translate today, in the world of affiliation, writing an article about the best bonuses in Sweepstakes, for example, it's indistinguishable now from a person if it's written by AI or if it's written by a person. And I was talking to someone who is working with content production for content studios, and they are like, when you buy content written from an actual person, the buyer is like, oh yeah, how can you prove that it's a person? And some studios have started to video the writers that are writing the article to prove that it's a human being that is writing the article. But then what's the point of proving that it's a person writing an article if the AI can write the same article, right? And you would imagine the same thing will happen in game production eventually, that it will be indistinguishable from a person creating.
Yeah. No, but I met someone that was showing me like this slot. The graphic of this slot is created by an AI.
Yeah.
Just Stability AI, kind of just generating pictures. It's so easy to do it. Of course, they need to do some tweaks here and there, but they get a basic of it. And just looking at coding, like coding 5 years ago, you need to write all the code. Today, you can actually use ChatGPT and other tools to write the program for you, or make sure it's right, or just translate it from C to C++, C to Python, or anything like that. So, and that then comes back to one. I was talking to someone last week. Okay, how many slots is there in the US? I think we concluded like 2,000-3,000. And what do we have in Europe? 10, 20,000? And what happens, like 10, 20,000, not that much, but what happens if someone starts building 100 games a day? Just pushing out like different mathematics, different sound, visual, audios, just push it out via an aggregator of the 5, 10 big aggregators, push it out to the market and just give it to the operators like, hey, here, take my game. You pay 0.5% instead of paying 5% to, and you don't, because I'm like one guy sitting in a basement creating these games. I don't have this overhead cost like the big studios. I think it would work. So if someone has the idea,
but just take it one step further, Rickard. I think we're almost at the finish line here, because why don't the operators just create their own games? Why don't the operators use it? So imagine there's a supplier who will supply to you the AI software that will create its own games, right? And you as Entain will purchase this AI software and prompt it to create games that are relevant to whatever Entain is currently thinking about. And it can just churn out games that are innovative, interesting, new ways of thinking and so on. And all of a sudden, there is no need for Entain to work with any game supplier.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
And then it comes back to all the IPs and intellectual property into games. Like, didn't the Aristocrat manage to do some trademark of buffaloes? Like the trademark the buffalo, something like that. I don't really know exactly. I haven't looked into it. I heard it 2 weeks ago. And then that becomes more important for, because otherwise you just get copied. It's if you look at the games at the floor in Vegas, it's either buffaloes or
it's buffalo.
It's a buffalo or Chinese games or some pig or eagle. That's what you have. It's and when you know that one, you walk around, then it's like, okay, this is all the same games. But I love that.
I love that goddamn buffalo. When they say buffalo, then I feel happy. But to be honest, Goldfish 3, nothing is ever gonna beat Goldfish 3 by Light and Wonder. That is my ride or die slot that I will go to the grave with. So you are absolutely correct in that astute observation, Rickard, that it becomes all about IP. In the world of unlimited amount of slots, then again, let's make that argument again. There is no need for 400 game suppliers. There is only a need for the unlimited amount of slot machines you can create for free as an operator, or the powerful IPs that the players are requesting.
Yep. But that's come back to what we also saw on the floor in Vegas last week is the Interblocks, which is kind of a cool company. In my opinion, it's one of the booth they had in Vegas was everyone else have like massive ones. It's open. You can look inside. You can take pictures. You see exactly what they do from outside. Interblocks had a big wall. It was like a cube that you couldn't see in. It was like big signs saying that do not photograph. You cannot photograph here. It's illegal. You're not allowed to. And you try to look in. And there was like people standing, so you couldn't look in. And that's a very, very interesting company in terms of what they do. And I think they've been so successful in creating, like you had Evolution taking online to land-based, having that kind of physical experience online. I think that makes it super easy. That Interblocks did the other way around, that you have the land-based, but you don't need, when you play roulette or blackjack or something with the Interblocks, you don't need to talk to a dealer or someone. You can just do it with your computer, have your drink. You don't need to talk to anyone. You can have a roulette wheel spinning, but you're sitting like 10 meters away with your Interblocks terminal. And they've just created that really, really cool experience that I saw this week that a lot of people tried to copy. A year ago, I didn't see it, but this year there's a lot of people that tried to copy that kind of
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think another one that I think in 4 years' time when we do this podcast again, one of the biggest things that will happen is innovation from the online gambling environment into land-based. So imagine if Evolution is able to take floor space in the Venetian, for example, and builds a live version of Crazy Time. Imagine you can sit like you sit right now in the sports betting section, where you can sit down in a comfortable seat with a screen in front of you, and you have a Crazy Time live happening in the casino. How insane would that be? I mean, I would go to Vegas just to sit and play that.
Why are they not doing that?
I mean, this is the $1 million idea, right? This is, when Bill Hornbuckle is watching this very podcast, he will ask the same thing to his staff. How is it possible that we have not done this yet? This is such low-hanging fruit. The Americans love game shows, right? This is in their blood, in their what they're grown up with. Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, like all these game shows. And you always were visualizing as a kid or as a grown-up when you watch the TV that like one day I want to be a part of that game show. And imagine you can sit there in Vegas and once in a while someone gets pulled up on stage to pull the lever or something like that. Like, I mean, it would be amazing, right? It'd be a full party and like everyone had a great time there. Like, it would be insane.
That would be pretty cool, actually, to have that. Again, it's all about that, like transferring from online to offline to that hybrid omnichannel, that mode, and going back and forth and see what works online also works land-based, and that land-based also works online. And
you know what's going to happen, Rickard? It's going to be one of those trigger moments where one casino will do it and then everyone will follow.
100%. And that's going to be, and not having, let's say, the people at the Venetian or Encore or dressed like someone working there, but dressed up as the Monopoly figure doing the Monopoly game and so on, to get that kind of show instead of just kind of boring dealer outfit.
Yeah. And that's always what's been missing in the States, that connection to the game show and actually being able to participate yourself. Like in our case in Sweden, we are grown up with this, my friend. We watch Bingolotto every Sunday, 7 p.m. And if you ask people in Sweden if they have gambled in the last year, they will say no, because they didn't realize that Bingolotto, which is like the live TV show where you can buy a lottery, you can participate and gamble on live TV. They wouldn't even recognize it as gambling. That's just like a people's activity, right? It's like such a ingrained way of the families to come together in the way we are growing up. So you would just imagine that. I mean, if we take it a step further, imagine this then, Rickard. Okay, so at first you have a game show in the land-based casino, like a Crazy Time and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then the next step is on ESPN picking that up and streaming it to 100 million subscribers on ESPN Play, right? And you can participate in the live game show directly through a live stream show.
Exactly, and then you can go to that place in, let's say, Detroit, Michigan, to actually be part of it, or to Vegas go there to be part of it. Like people are going to LA to be part of the different TV shows that's broadcasted to hundreds of millions of people from California. So no, it's going to be, we'll see in 4 years if someone had done it, and also if that product worked, if that was a product that the consumer actually wanted.
God damn it, Rickard. We are coming up with $1 billion ideas here, left, right, and center.
Yeah, it's like someone should call us.
I like it. Well, these game shows will need to be hosted somewhere. So call Rickard on 1-800 Internet Vikings, and he will help you out with these very ideas that we are talking about here.
Yeah.
On that note, Rickard, another prediction that we made 4 years ago, I asked you, where do you see Internet Vikings in a couple of years' time? And your prediction was that you will be almost at the size of Evolution. Now, Evolution, to be fair, have decreased their market cap in the last couple of years. So I suppose you have gotten a couple of billion dollar closer to them because of that. But that didn't exactly come true, right? So I want to ask you, yeah.
But you need to have high ambitions, and I think that we managed, like I said, we were just doing our business plan for the US, and our big push was 2.5 years ago. So 30 months ago, we did that, and we have gone from, at that time, 2.5 years ago, we had like 5% of our revenue in the US. Today, it's 75%. So today, Internet Vikings is like, it's a US company. We do everything we do is for the US market, I would say. But it is especially marketing, commercial wise. And that have really transformed Internet Vikings. And that growth, it's like we have, like in numbers, quadrupled the company in 2.5 years. I'm super proud of what we've done, like together with like every employee and every colleague at Internet Vikings, because it have been a tremendous amount of work. It's been a lot of travel for a lot of people. It's been a lot of nights with servers trying to get things going, but we managed to solve it, and we managed to. There was one monopolist in the industry at that time when we did the business plan. Today, we challenged them, and we did that super well. You're super focused on the customer, super focused on making a great product, even though we're selling servers. Like, it's not rocket science, but focusing on the customer, focusing on building that experience for them to have a greater product than what they used to have. And we managed to do it. And again, I was a bit naive, I think, when we were like, how hard can it be 4 years ago? But we succeeded. And I'm super proud of everyone, because it was a lot of hard work from a lot of colleagues.
That's awesome, man. And where do you see, so you grow 4x since last time, 4 years ago. And if you think about the next 4 years, where do you see the 4x growth coming from in the next 4 years?
Now, we'll see now with the election, and not the federal, like the US, but the local elections in the US, see a little bit what happens with the market next year. And if they're going to regulate more states, do they need more money for every promise they do into this election? What happens on the legislation in the US? I think the entire industry hope that a few states, like I talked to someone who's like, 2-3 states a year doing a legislation for online casino. That would be perfect. 2-3 states a year for the next decade. That's going to be perfect for the industry. It will solve the black market issues. It will solve any other like spend from a consumer going to non-local licensed casinos and sportsbooks in the US. So I think that's going to be what everyone is looking for. And I hope it happens, because like, in theory, it should. But of course, theory and practice is not always the same. But I do believe that it would. It should work. There should be a few states coming up the coming years, and that would be good for us. It would be good for the industry, and that's what I hope.
Yeah, brilliant. And as a final question for you today, Rickard, do you see, so US is still where you're laser focused? You're not looking to add the same type of growth that you had in the US to Brazil, for example, or other fast-growing regulated territories?
No, and it's quite easy. In the US, we have a unique selling point that we do license. We have local licenses in each and every state that we need to. And if we look at the big hyperscalers, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they don't. And we compete with them because of that. And that's what our reason to exist. And that's why we do it. And that's why we do it so well. And the federal legislation will never go away. Like the federal ban, like the Wire Act, won't go away. There's no one wants it, because everyone in the market thinks it's good, because it hinders everyone else to go into the market. There's no reason to get it removed. And So with that said, we super focus on the US, focus on that because that's where we have a unique selling point, and we'll see when Amazon starts their own casino or sportsbook, and Google and Microsoft, then maybe customer won't. Maybe they want to have another hosting company outside of the US as well.
Or Internet Viking bet.com. Who knows?
Viking bet. No. That's a good one. No. I'm very good at running a hosting company. I'm very good at doing B2B sales. I have no idea how to run a casino. I don't know anything about sports betting. I don't I know there's buffaloes in a slot, and they're like
goldfish.
Yeah, book of something and stars that bursting. That's that's what I know. Besides that, I don't know anything about the gaming industry. But I'm very, very good at servers.
Rickard, this should be your advertisement, by the way. That should be the advertisement campaign next time. We have no idea about iGaming or bursting stars, but we know about hosting. That's right. That's all you need to know, my friend. Rickard, it's been great today. We laid the framework for a follow-up podcast here. I hope it doesn't take 4 years, by the way. I think we should do it sooner than that. And we have a lot to follow up on at that time. So it's been a fantastic episode here today. And thank you, Rickard, for taking your time. And let's see how the election goes.
Yeah, thank you.